Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be reasonably short presentation. You've had it.
Right, Cody and Kathy are going to listen in. So, look, just to set the scene for this community infrastructure, you good, John? Cool. This is really important to us. I mean, you know that we've got the, I mean, you know, because we've been being on about it. Just a growing town, we've got an asset sales reserve that we want to invest in community infrastructure. We've got community groups that are desperate for places to facilitate, places to play and everything else like that. We wish we could click our fingers. We know it's not that case. So thank you for setting the scene for us and sort of giving us some hope and giving us some direction as to where we should put our efforts to help that community need.
Okay, look, thank you for the opportunity to give a bit of an overview about social and community. So when I say social and community infrastructure, I'm kind of referring to the same thing. Both those two languages are used interchangeably right throughout the country. So I guess probably I'd start by saying we have, for the first time in 2024, we introduced social infrastructure into our 30-year infrastructure strategy. Now, at that point in time, when we pulled all the information together, we realised there were a little few gaps in some things that we had, and we need to do some more work around that. So we've done a lot more work, obviously, since then. But I guess what we're trying to say is, infrastructure is just not about, pipes in the roads or, or the roads and the surface that goes on. It's actually about our social fabric. It's about our communities, how we want to recreate, how we want to go to a library or watch a movie somewhere or go and look at a piece of art somewhere. So it is really a real crucial part of what makes up our communities. And I've been lucky enough to be working in the sector for probably 30-ish years. Just saying that. So, I've seen some good things and I've seen some bad things over the years, and how infrastructure is built, developed, planned. I guess I'm very fortunate that I have the opportunity to help work pulling it together for this community, and looking at what that looks like in association with community. So what I'd like to do today is just go through very quickly the presentation. I'll take most of it as read because it's I've sent it to you obviously previously. But there are some key components that I really want to focus on around complexity. Unfortunately, there's just no silver bullet or one answer to how you plan for infrastructure. And what I want to do is show you sort of some of the steps that we go through to be able to pull that together, but then also look at what does that then mean and what are the benefits. So, without further ado. So social community infrastructure, when we talk that language, we're talking about anything from community centres, community meeting spaces, arts, cultural heritage places, libraries, reserves, parks, cemeteries, playgrounds, sports fields, artificial turfs, sport and rec facilities, whether that be an athletics track, whether that be a indoor court, whether that be a pool, whether that be an ice rink or a hard surface area for multi-sport, basketball, outdoor basketball. What it doesn't, our responsibilities under the local government is for all of those things as social infrastructure. We are not responsible for the provision of health facilities or education facilities under the Local Government Act. We as council, we take definitely a network approach. We are not the only provider, as we know in this community, like our community centre, for example. We're not the only providers of community infrastructure at all. And we have a obligation to provide it under the Local Government Act. However, there are a variety of ways in which we can do that. So it may be that we don't provide any of it, we partner with people to provide it, or we actually provide it ourselves. So this lovely, it's
AI generated.
AI generated. You can tell it's AI generated, absolutely. And the reason I actually, to be honest, I had a conversation with Community Board Member Vito around there are so many complex pieces of information that form up the basis of how we plan and what we know. And trying to logically step through every single one of those and every single piece of information is really confusing. And if I'm standing at a barbecue talking about what is social infrastructure and how do I plan for that, I need to be able to say, this is the easiest way to do it. Is we have a melting pot of information we put together and it spits out some stuff at the end in a very simple way. We cook it up, and there's some things, it's like when you're cooking at home, you throw some ingredients in. Some ingredients have more taste and more flavour than others. Some are just to, spice it up a little bit. Some are just to cool it down a bit. So I think probably the key thing to say from here is one of the key pieces of information, obviously, that drives when we put infrastructure in place is around population projections. And we all know, we know our population projections here are forecast to grow significantly. But it also comes down to what funding is available at the time. How do we access funding, whether it be alternate funding options or whether it be through the long-term plan, which is really our funding mechanism for these things. And also, what's the desire by the community and the needs of the community. For example, and I'll get to it in a little bit, but if we take arts and culture, for example, there is actually no hard provision measure in New Zealand for arts and culture. So in other words, there's nothing that says we need to buy one art gallery for 45,000 people, for example. And a whole lot of other areas, in sport and rec particularly, and a few others, there's definitely some hard measures around that. But particularly for the arts, there isn't that kind of hard measure. So it makes it a little bit more qualitative for us to look at that and say, how do we actually provide that for our community? And there are some ways in which we can do that. There's some measures overseas, absolutely, we can look at bringing in to try and form that view, which is what we are doing in our 30-year infrastructure strategy. Just to give you an idea of kind of how busy the community services team been over the last probably 10 years or so, but look, this is just simply a list of all the strategic documents that form up how we put together the strategies and how we put together, I guess, the planning for what we want to do in the long term for our communities, on behalf of our communities. What I would say is these have all been signed off by council. So they form the basis for how we make decisions, how you make decisions in the future, and where the ideal scenarios that you want to get to, and how the steps to get there. We've got some still to do. Obviously, we've got a Sport and Rec Plays Active and Recreation Sport Strategy to complete. We've got a sort of facilities component, which is the infrastructure stuff. We've got that. But we actually don't have, okay, how do we then activate those spaces? How do we then provide, sport and recreation services that the community want in different areas? So there's a lot of work in that we're going to pull together over the next period of time.
Just to the end of it?
If that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. So the next one, look, I'm not expecting you to read this at all. This is just simply, it's some information out of our community facility strategy. It exists, it's online. All I'm saying is essentially we have some objectives. We have different sectors, obviously, within community services, from parks, sport and rec, libraries, aquatics, etc. We have those provision measures for some of those things. We have an idea of a framework as far as the distribution of facilities and what type and level and hierarchy of facilities that we have across the district. And we also have some really clear principles about, how do we make those, or how do you make those decisions in actually allocating those different infrastructure facilities across the district. So what I thought I'd do very quickly is just say, look, this is the last from when I came in here in 2016-ish. This is kind of the list of things that we've actually completed in the Wānaka-Upper area in the last 10 years. It's not bad, It's not as much as I would love to do, and certainly I'm sure as much as the community want us to do. But we are actually working towards trying to deliver what those strategies say that we need to deliver. You'll be pleased to know at the moment, obviously we've just been out tender. In fact, I think the tender's closed and been evaluated for the wooden floor replacement coming up in December this year at the Wānaka Rec Centre. Sorry, not the wooden floor replacement, sorry, the floor replacement to a wooden floor coming up in December. We have ordered the floodlights for Wānaka Rec Centre, and they should be here very soon. They'll be hopefully up and running before winter. And we're just going out for a notice of intent for both the sports fields, drainage upgrade at the AMP showgrounds, up at the rugby, and also the floodlights there. And as you see, we're nearly closing out the end of the Valentine Road remediation site works as well. So there's some really good things happening. We're getting to a good point, but there's certainly a long way to go. This lovely diagram, I kind of put it in obviously the top four are really the kind of key chunky areas in which is what was currently invested in our 24 to 34 LTP, long-term plan. As you quite easily can see, as the bubbles get bigger, they get bigger towards the back of the years. And unfortunately, at the point in time we went through the LTP process, we had the three waters scenario being in the plan, then it was out of the plan, and then it got thrown back in the plan, which meant we had to shuffle the dollars around to meet our debt thresholds and meet what we were able to deliver in that 10-year window. What I would say, probably the slide shows very clearly here, is actually the largest investment that council put into infrastructure in this district. It's not necessarily the new capital bit, not the nice shiny stuff at the front end. It's actually the ongoing renewals and maintenance that we have to invest over the lifetime of those assets. So it's always something to really carefully remember. What that actually looks like is that actually you're not just investing in X dollars at the front, you're actually investing in the next 30 to 50 years, ensuring those assets are well maintained and continue to be fit for purpose, or alternatively merge, divulge, or expand or decrease will be rationalised. I think, to be perfectly honest, as a QLDC officer, we have heard very strongly from the community over the last, I don't know how many years, every year I've been here. It'd be fair to say that council staff, really understand the needs of what the community are wanting in our district, and we've developed our strategies around that. We've listened, we've engaged. We are, I guess, in the position at the moment where, from my perspective, we should be delivering. Delivery, not delays, is the way I would put it. And we have, obviously, as we've got bigger as a district, the land prices have gone up, the rents have gone up, and this has caused lots of issues for our community groups. So on the screen here, we've got 20. That's the starter for 10. We know we've got 60 on our books, roughly, ballpark, that are wanting either land or buildings. We get groups coming to us all the time. Just give us the land and we'll build a building. Great, but there's a little bit more work that needs to be done before that happens. And for council, when I first started, I think we've probably only had 5 or 6 or 7 kind of groups come at us to do this sort of stuff. But as population grows, obviously there's more groups come on board, and also more people join other clubs, and so we get more of a demand moving forward. So what we are doing, rather than dealing with every single individual ones, what we're trying to do is looking and saying, how do we put together a bit of a process and day like this in front of council, so council can make those decisions. How do you want to work with our community around development facilities in the future? And from both the land, the leases, the licenses, a building perspective, to ensure that we can actually, obviously, meet the needs of what our community actually want. What I would say is, based on our principles, if somebody comes to us with a single-use building, no revenue generating in the current environment, it's going to be tough, to say yes. Reality is, we're looking at multi-use, flexible buildings, flexible uses of land for multiple groups. And to be honest, our spaces report in 2024, it was really pleasing to see that there was an increase in collaboration by community groups together in buildings or on land. Probably forced to, because the building prices have gone up and all the rest of it with land and buildings, but the reality, it is good to see that sharing going on, and we certainly encourage that moving forward.
Nice.
So what I've done, I've kind of gone, these are the main kind of chunky pieces of infrastructure in each of the kind of key sectors that basically we need to look at providing over the next 30 years based on our strategies. I haven't gone into individual projects and those things. I'm just giving you the high level view of these are the things that actually we need to be delivering based on what it looks like in our provision measures, what the needs of the community are saying, the population projects, and all those other things in the melting pot. These are the things we actually need to be having. So this, in essence, is almost the start of a 30-year list of infrastructure for development across the district. So upcoming work program, just to give you a quick snapshot, and then more than happy to answer any questions. As I said before, we're working through this community facilities request. I'll facilities with best process, but we get hit from all sorts of different angles from different groups wanting things. So we want to be able to streamline that process. We want to be able to respond well to our community. And if the answer is no, the answer is no. If the answer is yes, we can work with you. Absolutely, we'll do that. But we've got to be fair and transparent. We've got to be equitable, and we've got to make sure that councillors and community board are very much in those decision-making processes around what we're doing with our community groups and infrastructure. We're doing a current refresh of the 2018, it was actually signed up 2020, but 2018 QLDC, CLDC, I've got Spaces and Places infrastructure plan. That's due in June, with a draft hopefully in mid-May. To be honest, we've had a bit of an update following the recent engagement around while we've done some really great stuff, there are still some areas that we really need to start delivering on. And so I don't envisage there'll be a huge amount of changes within that strategy from what was previously put in place. In June, we obviously have an upcoming hui for the arts and cultural sector. Following that, I think there's going to be that theme of that hui is very much around infrastructure. We're looking to bring experts from all over the place to talk to us about social infrastructure and arts and culture, and they'll help shape a view around what that looks like moving forward for the wider district. Obviously, we're still working the Mount Iron. We had a lovely meeting today. Thank you, Dave, for reviews. And Wānaka Lakefront, obviously, is key projects. We will need to seek some direction through council and yourselves around Paitara. Obviously, we've leased the building, and the lease expires in 2032 within our next 10-year window. So we need to seek some direction around what that means. The reality is, if we decide not to renew the lease, the question is, what do you then do with 2 indoor courts, aspiring gymnastics, Kahu youth, a number of other things that happen. So there's a lot of planning that needs to be thought around that, and early direction would be helpful around that, because then that would enable staff to then put the appropriate information into that.
Just got a quick question about Paitara. The outdoor space, what's the status on that? Sorry, is there space that is currently not being used there that could be used?
So the landscape area, which is the hardcourt area next to the indoor courts, that has previously been used by red skating predominantly, and that's an area in which we could potentially utilise. Also, it's tight, but there is area in the outdoor sort of where the plant area used to be. There's potentially some space in there. At the moment, Kahu youth uses like that, and gymnastics uses that area as well. So yes, there's potentially some space in there. We obviously have the upstairs as well. When we first looked at this and when it first came to council, it was uneconomic to put in essentially redevelop that area. And so I know there's a piece of work at the moment to relook at that, to see what that looks like. And that's something that we'll consider as far as if we're going to release the investment that we put into that versus the cost of the asset. Obviously, we're through the community board submission through to the annual plan around directing staff or suggesting that staff investigate a artificial turf in Wānaka. That's consistent with our sports field network plan that we developed in 2024, that we were looking at artificial turf in Wānaka anyway. So that's something that obviously, once we go through the consultation process and land on that, we may begin some work in that. Overall, part of the work that I'm doing at the moment is update what I call the social infrastructure needs assessment matrix. It's taking all the provision measures, the population, all the data, and then outlining what that 30-year view looks like. That will be a piece of work that we'll be going back to council as part of the long-term workshops sometime in May, June, with that. And then obviously all the cost implications that come with that about what the costs are for this infrastructure. Ultimately, the 30-year infrastructure strategy will give us a view of what that looks like over the sort of 30-year view, break it down to the 10, and then obviously that'll break it down to the 3 years. how that timing on when that infrastructure gets delivered and will be brought in along with all the other infrastructure that council wants at that time. Remembering that often social infrastructure or community infrastructure follows sort of harder infrastructure, because obviously we need, power, we need water, we need data, we need, all those other things that are required if we don't have the availability in certain areas to be able to do that.
Okay, maybe physical, harder. Clearly, this is pretty hard, isn't it? So.
This is very hard, but certainly there are times in which we'd love to put things on open spaces, but the reality is we don't have the existing infrastructure to be able to do that, to enable those things to occur.
Questions, Cody? Thanks, Simon.
When we talked about the artificial turf, we talked about multi-use. Is it going to be multi-use, or is it more going to be footballs instead?
Look, I think so when we did the sports field network plan, that indicated obviously we had an existing sort of shorter pile multi-use turf at the Wānaka Rec Centre, and that obviously we considered within the mix of looking at artificial turf. What we've heard very clearly is from, I guess, the football and rugby community, predominantly around the need for sports fields and extra provision and trainings. So I would imagine that, yes, absolutely be multi-use. We'll use all sorts of things. So there will be a conversation at some stage between long pile and short pile. Might end up somewhere in the middle, so it'll be used for all. But yeah, so that will certainly be one of the key principles and criteria is who's going to use it, maximum usage and participation by the community where possible, best location, accessibility, transport. There's a whole bunch of matrix. So that's right.
Just one more question. Does council's looking at going from development contributions to development levies? Does levies help sport and rec and social infrastructure any better? And can you speak to sort of nuance?
Look, I think absolutely. Look, if we can get the development levies and we can get potentially infrastructure paid in advance, that certainly does help. Yeah.
Cool. So it's just better. That's good to know.
I'm going to have a question on the end. We've got 2.5 years left on our term. Yeah, as elected members, what can we expect to see delivered in that? What's realistic out of that wish list of the community needs and everything else like that? Actually cutting the ribbon.
Well, at this stage, obviously we're finishing 26-27 will be the third year of the last LTP, and the investment program has been set by the LTP. So year 4, at this stage, there's nothing, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing really too chunky in there per se. I'm just trying to no, that's year 3. Sorry, yeah. So your next from July onwards to July next year, that's within that provision. That's $500,000 that we've got in there, $500,000 for wood and floor. Obviously, we were, I guess, when we put the 24 plan together, the years 4, 5, 6, and 7 were very lean for social infrastructure because we had to push a lot of our social infrastructure out. So the LTP is the opportunity to bring that back in for, I guess, not your next 13 months, but certainly from then onwards to deliver what's required in infrastructure. We were obviously Valentine Road, we were obviously looking at having the first stage doing the mitigation, and we've been able to bring money forward for that, been able to bring forward for the drainage upgrade, the lighting upgrades. All that money was brought forward in the LTP. So again, it's the same question around bringing money forward into the LTP in those years 4, 5, 6 of the 24 plan, say for year 1, 2, 3, 4 of the new plan.
And then John.
Thank you. I mean, I just want to reflect on your comment that we have achieved a lot, and I mean that's always so. My first foray into local body politics here was actually a thing called the Wānaka Sport and Recreation Action Group, and we were advocating for, investment in a new swimming pool and things like that. And we literally had no built sports facilities, council built sports facilities or structures in the Upper Clutha at that point in time. And we've certainly got a lot more now. So that's great to see. One thing you sort of did touch on is what is the level of service that we're targeting here? Because, there's clearly a whole lot of wants, a whole lot of needs and a whole lot of aspirations, and they all sit in slightly different things. As you said, we either provide them, we're the sole provider, we either provide them in partnership, we either support the provision of them, or we leave it to somebody else. And there's sort of, different categories. Now, some of the big investments, I suppose we don't really understand, is active recreation part of that, basketball courts in small communities, half courts in small communities, is bike tracks within that, or is that a partnership thing? But things like the climbing walls and the water slides and the things that they're lucky enough to have in Queenstown.
I'm going to need a question from you quickly.
Yeah. Is there a consistent level of service that we're targeting, and will we be expecting those things to be provided across the district?
So I think there's probably two ways to answer that. Firstly, the 30-year infrastructure strategy already determines that we're behind what would be considered a level of an appropriate level of service for the population that we have. And that's what the first thing to say. And that's across the district. And obviously, in this area, we know that Sportsfields, for example, we're well behind the provision of ours. Yep, totally. So that's a given.
But notwithstanding, you're still proposing to build a new climbing wall and a new gymnasium in Queenstown. So that's the reason I'm asking. Are we expecting those things to be part of our level of service provision in our district?
Yes. So for indoor courts, absolutely. Yep, we're behind in our provision of indoor courts across the district. For climbing wall, we are not proposing to develop a climbing wall at this point in time. We were very clearly directed. In anywhere at this point in time. Okay. We were very clearly directed by council back in April last year around that within the indoor courts project that was excluded from that project. The scope was very clear what we were asked to look at. I think probably there's a balancing act to be done between hierarchies of facilities. So we're talking national, regional, local provision. We've obviously got a geographical difference here, right? So the routing, we start talking about hubs. We know that Wānaka Rec Centre is a hub. We know that Valentine Road will be a hub. We know that Queenstown Event Centre will be a hub. We have those already identified as key hubs for the district. What we're seeing increasingly, and certainly with the current state in Iran at the moment, fuel dependencies, there is certainly a big push amongst councils across the country to go back to locally led provision in small areas. Making sure that all the different areas that we've got in our neighbourhoods have got little local areas that people can play, various sports and hardcore areas and playgrounds and open space. It's always challenging in our district. When we look at those new developments and new growth areas, we try really hard to try and ensure that we're providing that provision within those areas. But ultimately, there will need to be, as a district, based on population, there'll only have to be a certain number of different levels of provision for different activities and facilities.
Thank you, John, and then I'm going to draw this to a close, pretty close, because I need to wrap up in 3 minutes. John.
Coming back to Simon's question about delivery in the term of this, you referenced the 10-year plan, but given the lead time for anything to actually happen that comes out of that 10-year plan, how can you ensure that what is in that first year of that 10-year plan is delivered in that first? How can you do the preliminary work in the last year of the current 3-year, so that when we roll into the 10-year plan, we get delivery rather than just more planning?
So I wouldn't mind having an answer to that first, John, and Simon can have a crack. So actually, as a group, we've really focused on that because it's been an issue for the previous board as well as it has committees in council. Community Services Inc. generally hits the KPI within the investment, which is required to 85-90% to 105 in the capital and the renewal program, and we can demonstrate that it's captured in the regular data updates and reported against. So we are really cognizant. If you're going to say you're going to do it, you're going to do it. We have a high expectation threshold within this wider community that we have delivered against that. The challenge will be it's not about us, it's about us.
Yeah.
Because you will, as elected officials, be challenged with the old chestnut going forward about are you going to buy that or are you going to buy that? And this is what Simon's pointed out, we've done a lot to back up the evidence base over many years about the strategic intent. and break this down right down to what sort of numbers of rugby balls we need to have operating for kids to get sport active. But what we can't do is always determine the capital investment that could be actually seen to be nice to have rather than the needs to have to meet the community social infrastructure that Simon here, not just Simon, Patrick and yourself as a group completely understand. And we can talk to you and give you the shopping list about the trail networks, the work we'll do on the next phase of the waterfront, the sports fields, the lighting, But that year one will be clearly determined by what level of investment we have to put back into the system.
I'm going to push pause there. Becky, did you have a quick question before we wrap up?
Oh, I did, thank you. It was just around the policy that we're doing around who gets what pieces of land. How are we, for the public, because I think I have an answer in the background, but how are we dealing with urgent applications for land while this policy is being developed, and is there a timeline for approving the policy?
Urgent applications for land.
Urgent applications where a community group may lose their current piece of land and be unable to house themselves.
So we, as part of the 60-odd groups, we had a look at what ones have more priority need than others. Absolutely, but when then we'll obviously need to daylight that, work through exactly what that means, and then put that in front of council to determine which ones we want to look at first.
Okay, and when can we expect to see that?
My understanding is July.
And actually, Nikki did kind of avoid calling it a policy, right? It used to be a guideline. And there's three elements that are going to be key principles, just quickly, Simon. Is, just because you've got high net worth individuals with big pockets, is that going to be a key equity driver? We've also got a bigger growing community, so it's not just out around sport and rec. We've got faith-based agencies looking for plots. And we've also got the challenge, everything. And we've also got the how do we work with the likes of yourself about a priority system that people actually then have some surety. And it's going to take some piece because we've only got 2,500 hectares across the network.
But we're expecting that to come back to table in June. And in the meantime, urgent applications.
Yeah, we've been working through it as a process as we have done in the past. And one-on-ones we bring back the likes of yourselves and that.
Thank you.
Cheers, team. Simon, this quarter is going to continue on, and thanks for starting it off. So appreciate that.
Nice.
Cheers, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Straight to Jenny, please. Jenny, we're Blue Green Network.
Following up, Simon.
I'm sure you will. Always happy to have a conversation.
Kia ora, Jenny. Thanks for coming and updating us. We're going to be as efficient as we can. It's important, this Blue Green Network update, because we've been fully involved in it. And love to hear an update from you. How are we going?
Jump up and begin.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. I'm Jeannie Galavasi, a principal planner in the Parks and Reserves team, and for a couple of years now I've been working on the Blue Green Network, and pleased to bring the plan and the public input back to you today, with the view that we get this adopted in May at the Port Council meeting, so which has been much anticipated, and I've anticipated it a lot. I don't know if anyone else has. It's good to get it adopted so we can move forward with the next phases of our work program. Let me just share the screen presentation. Okay, sorry about that. So just to give a really quick reminder as to what is the Blue Green Network Plan, what are we trying to achieve. It is a strategic, high-level document which will help guide us with our future planning, and it does have a focus on the priority development areas as identified in the spatial plan, and the settlements. So just to show you there on the map, it is not the entire district in the rural areas, but it is the urban areas, and we're trying to identify how we can incorporate the principles of the Blue Green Network into those urban areas, particularly as they are subject to intensification and development. Hopefully you're familiar with those in the spatial plan. So what is the blue-green network? What do we, what does that mean when we talk about it? We often talk about the open space network, which has a really heavy focus on the land. The work that we've done, we did this in partnership with Kaitahu, and early on it was identified, particularly for Kaitahu, that Te Mana o Te Wai, so it is the water first, it's the blue components first. So in urban environments, this, and particularly in our district, this is the lake shores, it's the lake, it's the rivers, it's the waterways, it's the wetlands, and it's the fauna that lives within that as well. So it's not just about people, it's about what else is using that environment. And really strongly what's come through this and the feedback is it's not just about the obvious waterways, but stormwater is a really important part of this function. It's the natural systems of how that water did used to flow over the landscape, and then what we do with it now, and then the impacts of what that has on the lakes and the rivers and how people use that. So the green components are the sort of the natural systems that exist on the land component and how that interacts with the blue. And for Kaitahu, a really important part of how they view what we call the blue-green network is kia tiki tai, which is, all of the environment is connected, and it's the interconnected of this that we have to plan for. We shouldn't be separating out water, land, and people, and so that forms part of our principles of blue-green network. And then the part that often people are really focused on, particularly in the area of work that we do in parks and reserves, is what are the community components of that? How do people interact with the blue and the green? How do we provide for that? How do we at council enable people to use those spaces, connections, biodiversity protection, but also the urban parks where we kind of create those spaces as well. So it's really been about identifying what exists, what are the components with that, and then how do we provide for better access to that as well, including sport and recreation within that. So we went out for public engagement on our plan, which is a large document, and we were interested to see how the public would connect with that, given that it's the plan itself is 30 or 40 pages and then a series of individual plans within that as well. And we're pretty pleased to see that we did have quite a high level of engagement and relatively wide scope of the sector as well. So we had a lot of the community groups, we had Health New Zealand, Federated Farmers, a couple of developers, the usual suspects in terms of our community groups that we're all familiar with, and a lot of local residences as well. So we had 75 submissions, which sometimes doesn't sound like that lot, but it was actually all quite comprehensive, the feedback. So I've spent weeks and weeks, deciphering all of the individual submissions. A lot of people provided a lot more than just the usual 1 or 2 line responses, which was really great to see. So what did they say? Many were focused on particular areas, the local community plans, but 80% of the submitters supported the blue-green network. 12% were neutral, and that's usually they might have had 1 or 2 specific things to say about, wanting a safe crossing over a highway or a particular trail connection, and 8% opposed. A couple of those might have been private landowners where they might have had a part of the network identified on their land, or that they were opposing it because it didn't go far enough to a particular element that they wanted. So, and then this isn't particularly representative because often some of these were the same matter that some of the submitters wanted, but you can see there is a pretty wide range of feedback with the particular local blue-green plans, which is good to see. A lot of Wānaka submitters in particular, which is great. So overall, and obviously there was a lot of feedback. There was a strong acknowledgement that the blue-green network is important for the residents and its wider communities and the environment. People acknowledge that it's a useful tool for locals and visitors to be able to use to recognise what is the community sees as important and things that we need to work on. And it's helpful for providing a plan for communities to coordinate their efforts, because we do rely heavily, as you know, on our community to protect and enhance the values. And really strong support shared for nature, protecting of nature, particularly in the face of growth, and how important it is for mental, physical health, climate change resilience, and connectivity. A lot of feedback was helpful in that it suggested what more that we could do. Really strongly came through that we need to do more, we need to do it now, we need to, as you know, probably all familiar with the feedback, we need to halt biodiversity decline, we need to improve water quality. Does this plan go far enough? Does it have enough teeth? Everybody, nobody opposes parks and trails that we do have, and they want more of them, in particular some connectivity in some of the key areas. 3 parks, Albert Town and the Southern Corridor came through really strongly as having some significant barriers to connectivity. Food resilience came through really strongly, particularly in the Upper Clutha. The current plan doesn't go into a lot of detail around protection of food production and food resilience. It does focus on the urban areas, not the rural areas. So it's, but yeah, definitely a strong desire to see that better protected. Yeah, a lot of feedback around the mapping and improvement of our stormwater systems. Like that Wānaka here today provided some really great feedback around how we could do that better going forward. More protection for open space, particularly around Lake Hawea, and I think that acknowledges that a lot of the open space in Hawea is actually not QLDC, it's primarily LINZ, so how do we address that? Yeah, I've touched on before, more active travel elements, Hammers Farm, Frankton and Upper Clutha, and then yeah, particular point of interest is this desire for a safe crossing point over State Highway 6. So that came through repeatedly in quite a few submissions. So I've pretty much touched on these. These are sort of key things. Other thoughts, you know, how do we strengthen elements of this? How do we get this into implementation? How does the blue-green network and the work that we have done, how do we encompass other land parcels that's not QLDC administered? What about the rural areas? And then obviously the fast track processes which came about after we've started work on this. How do we apply this to areas that aren't within our spatial plan? I would say a lot of the feedback is crosses into other parts of council and other work programs, particularly active travel, stormwater, and the district plan, I guess. So a big challenge for us and what we want to work on going forward is how we take all of the feedback that we've received and work with the other departments on the pieces of work that they're doing and ensure that the feedback's been heard and that we can start influencing future work programs for other departments as well on the importance of this network. Some of the changes that we have been able to make within the plan itself is obviously just some smaller identification of on the local plans in particular around trail connections, areas which the community have identified that will be important for how they use those spaces, and strengthening the wording in the plan, particularly around stormwater and making space for the water, identification of important stormwater systems. So that's to the plan as it exists, and recognising that the maps and the plan itself, it had to reach a static point. We had to stop mapping, stop identifying features so that we could get this adopted. But really going forward, it'd be great to have the maps, and noting that the plan comprises the plan itself, the GIS maps and the local blue-green plans for individual communities. And it's those two latter ones that we really want to continue to work on, ideally making the maps live, making them really accessible for the public, and using those layers and adding to layers, mapping waterways and those sorts of things as council moves forward with different pieces of
Amazing work. We've got time for about 5 minutes worth of questions. Just one quick one from me. Is this being replicated in every other council? Is this a QLDC specific blue-green network? Like are other councils doing it, or is it unique to us?
So we've actually been contacted by quite a few different councils as we've progressed with work, and obviously looked at work that has been done. A lot of other councils it is primarily like your green infrastructure and your stormwater. It focuses primarily on that, not so much the recreation and ecological side of it. And then we've had regional councils, Dunedin City Council, where they have more of an ecological focus, less of a, they're kind of coming at it from the other side. So in this format and within our scope, this is the first of its kind, and partnering so strongly with Kaitahu and the recommendations that came through from them.
So are we productising this and using it as a revenue stream to offset rates?
Well, I know that the consultants are very keen for us to get it adopted so that they can start.
I said it slightly flippantly, but I actually underneath it was very true.
I think we need to measure the success of it first and how we implement it before we do that.
Well, yeah, it's great. It's great IP. Nikki and then John.
Thank you. Quick one, just around implementation and making sure this. What am I trying to say? I think that this is potentially going to be really helpful with us putting stormwater into our LGP, even though we have a water CCO. I feel like there's a connection. You've already talked about this.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so because my understanding is we can't put Three Waters stuff into our long-term plan beyond that first year, because we will have a water services CCO. But there is some provision, I think, in the Act around we can where it is around integrating what we do with the CCO around that kind of infrastructure. So I just would like to see you talk to the people doing the LGP and maybe to our program director on the water services CCO, just to see whether this is something that could then how to make it work with that.
Really
with the water CCO.
Nikki, we can assist you with the question. We have inserted ourselves into some key hui coming up.
And
Because
this
picking up
document could
on
actually-
Murray and our colleagues from Wānaka,
Yeah.
That's Jenny's point. Like, we need to make sure internally and with the setup of that agency, they're quite clear
In
about
terms of the foundational documents, we could have this, depending on what it looks like, in our in the constitution as something.
It's Simon's point here of what other councils paying attention, but we're also paying attention to Auckland. Look how many houses they need to buy back to create the space. So we need to be looking at what does resilience, quality of water, all those experiences shared by partners and ourselves, and how we influence that through those
It's just not going to be an effective document unless we link it to those CCO foundational documents.
It's good to have your voice and support and that wider council feedback.
Thank you.
Just a comment on that as well. So I'm already working alongside our internal department on the stormwater catchment management plan review, and they're very interested in the synergy that we can have with the delivery network. And obviously going forward, most of these systems are often on reserve land that's administered by us. So how do we leverage that and get some better outcomes of the land? Because there's finite land, and the land often, as we've talked about in repeated things today, the land needs to do more than one thing, and we have quite a strong ability to influence that outcome.
I also have a potential implementation question in terms of connections. When council doesn't own the land, and a good example would be a link from Three Parks down to the Cadrona River, but midway along Riverbank Road. How will council work with planning around potential resource consent applications where there might be an opportunity?
Well, yeah, this is a favourite one that's been coming up for quite a few years, and we do work really hard in that space.
Short questions, John.
Well, I would say as one department in council, we work really hard to secure easements and connectivity, and this is a great blueprint to start with to identify where those gaps are. How do we work with developers, the community and planning to ensure that we are connected up and not isolated little bits and pieces?
It's just, my concern is that there hasn't always been that communication in terms of planning when potential links between subdivisions and stuff come up. The area between Riverbank Road, Orchard Road, that area is an example of how not to do it.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we improve that process so that we look at those bigger pictures. And that's my concern, and making sure that that happens.
Yeah, we're very aware of it, and yeah, looking for some more improvements in this space.
Kathy, possibly last question, Kathy?
Thank you. Just a clarification, you mentioned that there were some suggestions to enhance food resilience, particularly in the Upper Clutha, and the plan is currently focusing more urban versus rural. Could you just tell us a bit more about what that looks like?
I think some of the submitters were keen to see us put more focus on protecting existing food production. So in the rural, like the urban area, the rural area already. I guess that's out of the scope of what this plan does, and also that's more of a district plan rezoning conversation, protection of trees, fruit-growing trees. But then also, I think the key thing that we can do is how do we provide for food resilience of the blue-green network. Particularly land that council already administers or public land, how do we better facilitate that? And there's quite a bit of work going on in the Climate and Biodiversity Action Plan, so it's how do we take that feedback and feed into that. But this plan is not going to achieve council acquiring food production land, for example, or protecting that. That's for the district plan, and obviously with the RMA reforms and all of those sorts of things coming into
It's like an
play.
integration opportunity, in other words, connecting.
I think it's the start of a
Feedback from here
conversation. Yeah. But how do we do it better on our existing network?
Nice. Very good. Perfect timing. We've got the team from Cadrona, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's amazing how it crosses over. Just we'll talk about why I saw Cadrona up there as well. We talked about social infrastructure. It is almost the fulcrum around what a lot of other things.
Lots of momentum, hopefully.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Thanks for great work. Thanks, Jenny. Kia ora, Glenn, Linda. Welcome to. So we're just going to transition from internal workshops to external presentations, and Cadrona for a start, and then the team from as well. We're stopping recording, did you say? Yes.